Hey everybody, it's Carson Gourdie, the Champaign sports anchor for Fox Illinois and Champaign. And Illinois, they got that big win. They beat Michigan State 38-16. That was a game that Vegas, they could see it going in either way. Illinois was only a 2.5-point favorite, but in the second half, they cranked it up. Better defensive pressure, hitting those big plays in the passing game. Now they're a 7-3 football team. Some rumblings that there was some uneasiness after a 2-game losing streak. They lost to Oregon, they lost to Minnesota. And, that 6-1 start, that top 20 ranking, that was gone. There was a fear that this was going to be another bad November. Everybody knows in 2022, Illinois started 7-1 and they finished 8-5. Last year, they started 5-5. They finished 5-7. And just bottom line, when you have bad Novembers, it holds back the program. If you would have had a better November 2 years ago, you're playing in the Big Ten championship with a spot in the Rose Bowl, potentially. You have a better November last year, you're 7-5 and going to a bowl game. Beating Michigan State resets the season for Illinois. They're 7-3. They're back in the college football playoff rankings. And if they take care of business against a Rutgers team that they're favored against, and against a Northwestern team that they will surely be favored against, you're looking at 9 wins. That's the most wins since 2007. And you're going to be playing in a really good Florida bowl game. The Citrus Bowl, it's going to go to the best Big Ten team that doesn't make the college football playoff. Illinois is in line. This week, Illinois is going to be taking on a Rutgers team that started the year with high expectations, had a terrible midseason, but now they're coming back to form. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights started the year with expectations that they could potentially win 9 games. They were going to be the dark horse in the Big Ten. Limped out to a 4-4 start. The quarterback play was not strong. A bunch of injuries on the defensive side. But like Illinois, they've kind of seen a late season resurgence. And Rutgers, they're 6-4 and already clinched a bowl game. Like, you beat Maryland, you beat Minnesota. Is this a rejuvenated team?
I think so. I think no question about it. I mean, when they were 4-4 and going into that bye week, it looked ugly. It was things were not. I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to get this thing back on track. But I do think that they've gotten their confidence back. I think the winning obviously helps. The health factor obviously helps. The fact that they've gotten better on offense every week, that helps.
And a big reason why they've seen that mid-season surge is because of that quarterback play. They got a transfer quarterback from the Minnesota Golden Gophers last year.
Games. And I think also a big, factor too is just the development of Rutgers receivers. I mean, they have a receiver, Dymere Miller, who came over from Monmouth, and he broke many records at the FCS level. And they kind of brought him in to be the number one option, and he's been that. He's been a great weapon for Cali Madison, the offense. And then Rutgers has 2 young wide receivers, Ian Strong, who's in his second year, and then KJ Duff, who's a true freshman. And they're big, tall, Big Ten receivers.
And Ethan is not a guy that's going to kill you with the deep shots. He's the guy that feels more comfortable playing off the run, the play action pass, and dumping it off for 6, 7, 8 yards. He's a big intermediate guy. And I'm going to be honest, like, Ethan was not a good quarterback at Minnesota. Like, when Rutgers got him and everyone was hyping him up to be the savior of the Scarlet Knights, I had my doubts. This was a guy for the Golden Gophers that struggled to throw for 130 yards. I mean, he was a very pedestrian quarterback. I guess what Rutgers liked, what they saw from him, was that he's a pretty accurate quarterback and he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. And we've seen that with him so far. 14 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. If you're just box score watching, those are okay stats. And that's all Rutgers needs when they have a pretty good, pretty strong running game. But definitely the last 4 weeks, he has hit a different stride. In the first part of the year, the guy was struggling to crack 150 yards. The last 4 games, he has 200 yards in each game. And when you can throw the ball and keep defenses honest, that's going to open up your running game. 26 points against Minnesota. That's nothing to scoff at. A 14-point victory over Maryland. That's a good win. Now, Ethan's not going to be a dual threat guy. He's going to sit in the pocket and he's going to make clean decisions. But the guy that might steal the show for Rutgers is their 5'9" running back. Last year, he led the Big Ten in rushing with over 1,300 yards. This season, he's already cracked 1,000.
The ball, and they should with Kyle Mononga. He's a fantastic running back. Just became he just hit 1,000 yards during the Maryland game. He's the first Rutgers running back to have 1,000 yards in 2 back-to-back seasons since Ray Rice.
And that's the one thing I just can't pin down with Illinois this year. Like, before the season, I've said it a million times, they lost the law firm, right? They lost Keith Randolph. They lost Johnny Newton, and they didn't have the NIL money to get 2 NFL players on this roster. The players that they did have on the roster, like Alex Bray, he's a good player, but they're not the same as Johnny Newton. And that has been the inconsistent part of Illinois this year. Kansas ran the ball like crazy against Illinois, 6 yards a pop. Penn State ran the ball really well. Purdue's terrible this year. They scored 49 points from running the ball like crazy. Minnesota had a really good day. But then there's also times that Illinois looks pretty good stopping the run. Like we saw that against Nebraska, Michigan, and most recently against the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State was a team that was hot. Nate Carter ran the ball very well against Iowa and Michigan. Two good running defenses. But against Michigan State, they had around 40 yards rushing. And why that was so vital for Michigan State is because that forced Michigan State's young but talented quarterback Aiden Childs to have to throw the ball 40 times. And Aiden has really good legs. He's going to be good in the future, but he's not ready to carry a game on his own. He's not, what Ohio State had with Dwayne Haskins. He's not what Purdue had with Drew Brees. That guy needs help with a rushing attack, like a lot of teams. And I'm telling you right now, that's getting the same stories with Rutgers. Ethan needs a rushing attack. If Rutgers runs the ball for 150 to 200 yards, that's going to make it easier for Rutgers to find, open guys in the passing game. If you force Ethan to have to throw it 45 times, he might make a couple mistakes and he might not be as efficient. And Illinois did a really good job just with the pass rush last game. They lost Dylan Rosiak for the year with a foot fracture, but guys like Seth Coleman, guys like Gabe Yakis, they had really, really, really strong days against Michigan State last week. If Illinois can bottle up that defensive blitzes, that pressure, they're going to have a good day. But that's one concern that people have had with Aaron Henry's defense for Illinois. He's the defensive coordinator for the Orange and Blue. Sometimes they're kind of passive. There was one play specifically that everybody's talking about against Michigan State. 4th and goal, and they didn't send any blitzers. Aiden Childs got to sit in the pocket all day long, and he got a touchdown for Michigan State. And that made it a close game in the second half for a little bit. Everybody wants Illinois to keep applying that pressure. Gabe Yakis and Seth Coleman are potential NFL players. Take advantage. Rutgers defense, Greg Schiano is the head coach of Rutgers. And he's got a storied career. Penn State assistant, Ohio State defense coordinator when they're winning 12 games a year. Head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a guy that is just oozes defensive physicality. And they were awful this year in the middle parts of the season. 35 points to UCLA, one of the worst offenses in college football. 42 points to USC. This was a team that was getting gashed in the middle of the year. But the beat writer that I spoke to, he chalks it up to injuries. And the stats back it up. If they have gotten healthier the last 2 weeks, in the last 2 games against Minnesota, they held them to 19 points. That was a game that they controlled throughout. Maryland can put up some points. We saw it. They put up points against Michigan State. Mike Loxley is a good offensive mind. They got held down to 17 points. When I spoke to the beat reporter, he thinks that the running defense has not been as strong. And that makes sense. They just lost their best defensive lineman for the year. He's going to be out. So, if you're Illinois, you want to take advantage, with a Josh McCray, with an Aiden Lawfrey, with a Khalil Valentine, and just try to get 150 yards. That lessens the load for Luke Altmaier. And the point spread this week, it's like when Michael Scott was in the office, when he was talking to Jan and he said, snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. That's what's going on with the point spread right now. Illinois opened up as a 1.5 point favorite, quickly went to Rutgers as the 1.5 point favorite. Now the bettors all of a sudden, they like Illinois again. Illinois is a 1 point favorite. Bottom line, that's very much inside the margin of error if we're talking politics. That's pretty much saying Vegas is saying, I don't know who's going to win. That's going to be a pick'em game. Cliche as it sounds, it's the kind of game of who plays cleaner. Illinois' got weapons. Luke Altmaier is a very, very successful dual threat 4-star quarterback from Ole Miss who's got 2 pretty good weapons with Pat Bryant and Sakari Franklin. One of the things that I like to see from the Michigan State game, Luke avoided the sacks and he was accurate. That's not what we saw against Minnesota. That was quite opposite of what happened. Luke Altmaier, the last 3 games before Michigan State, was probably one of his worst stretches he's had at Illinois. Only 80 yards passing against Michigan. He had 2 interceptions against Oregon. And then against Minnesota, in the third quarter, he went 0 for 6 and almost threw a couple picks. And he also lost 2 fumbles. I don't think Luke had his greatest game against Michigan State, but he took advantage of opportunities and he played clean. Another thing I like to see was I thought the running game improved against Michigan State. Josh McCray was a big name, his freshman year in 2021. He had those two big games against Maryland and Purdue where he got 150 yards in each game. He kind of went over, into a 2-year slumber. The guy was dealing with injuries. He was dealing with adversity. Chase Brown was better. He took back the starting spot. But what's nice about Josh McCray is that he got healthier. And the reason why the coaches think that he has gotten better is because the workload's decreased. Last game, he only had 9 carries, but it was an effective, 61 yards that he gained. He's not expected to carry it 40 times like a Ron Dane or 35 times like a Chase Brown. Illinois has the luxury of having 3 above average running backs who are able to split the carries and stay fresh. I'm telling you, when it's the 1-yard line, and you got to try to tackle a 250-pound Josh McCray, good luck. Illinois is a 7-3 football team, and they got a chance to go 9-3. If Illinois actually sticks the landing and wins these 2 manageable games, that'd be the most wins for Illinois since 2007. Brett Bielema already said, the last 3 years, from 2022 till now, Illinois won 20 games in that span already. That is the best stretch that they've had since 1999 to 2001. But in today's college football landscape, it's extremely fluid of who stays up as a good program and who stays down. Illinois, they are a young team, but they are losing a lot next year, a lot of key pieces potentially. Shakari Franklin's graduating. Pat Bryant's going to the NFL. Is Gabe Yakis really going to be here next year? He's been playing on fire. Seth Coleman's finally gone. He's been here for 6 seasons. J.C. Davis is going to graduate. These are guys that you need to replace, probably via the transfer portal. And if you want to get guys, you got to get the money to have it. And I'm telling you, if you look into a donor in the eye and ask for money, they're more likely to give it to you after a strong finish, 9-3, Citrus Bowl, than if you go 7-5 and play in the Belk Bowl in North Carolina. This is going to be a game at Rutgers. It's not going to be the most hostile environment, but they are playing a team that's run by a competent head coach. Greg Schiano does not get enough credit. This is a guy that rebuilt Rutgers back in the 2000s. They were one of the worst Big East programs. He got them to number 2 in the country at one point. He got them to bowl games every single season. Greg Schiano was so good at Rutgers in the 2000s. It made the Big Ten, and the Big Ten was like, all right, let's invite him to our conference. And then obviously he left for the NFL. And he did not succeed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he got rehired to rebuild Rutgers. Chris Ash ran it into the ground. Bottom line, Rutgers was the worst Power 5 program in college football before Greg came back to rescue it. They were losing games 78-0 to Michigan in 2016. They were getting shut out regularly by Ohio State, Michigan State. And now this is a program that's going to bowl games on a regular basis. Now, Illinois and Rutgers, they don't play as much as they used to. There actually used to be a weird stretch where, under Lovie Smith and Rutgers, it seemed like they played each other every year. This is their first meeting since 2021 when they played in Champaign. That was a game that Rutgers was underdogs, but they actually pulled out a 20-14 victory over Illinois. That kept Illinois from going to a bowl game. Greg Schiano might not always have the horses, might not always have the personnel. There's going to be challenges when you have to recruit to a school like Rutgers, but he's going to prepare. So the game's this Saturday. It's going to be a 11 o'clock Central Time kickoff. And Illinois had a really good year. This was a year where they were hoping just to get 5.5 wins. They're going to get up to that. They've already clinched 7 wins. They got a real shot to get 8. Should be a pretty good game. Vegas thinks that this could swing anyway. It's only a 1-point spread. In my opinion, if Luke Altmaier has a good game, if Luke Altmaier doesn't have a bunch of fumbles, if Luke Altmaier gets protection, from that Illinois offensive line, I think he's going to have a good day finding Pat Bryant and Shakari Franklin down the field. I do think Rutgers is going to be able to put up some points. They have a legitimate running back who led the Big Ten in rushing last season. Nathan has definitely played more consistent. So it should be a good game. Thanks everybody for watching, and stay tuned for the updates for Illinois football on our websites, Fox Illinois and newschannel20.com.
Thanks for watching. Stick around by subscribing today and don't miss a single video.